The opinions expressed in the following program are provided for general information purposes only and should not be construed as advice from CJAD 800 or Bell Media. The following is sponsored content.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome to Today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business, presented by FL Montreal. I'm Josh Miller. The voice you are not hearing tonight is Dan Delmar. He is off, a little under the weather, so we hope he gets well soon and comes back at our next program. And so tonight on the program, we have another great entrepreneurial story. This is actually a couple and an entrepreneur and a business that actually is based out of Quebec, based out of Sherbrooke, a little eastern of Montreal. And they're going to talk about lots of different things. It's Interfonction, Interfonction. And Sébastien will be here and he'll talk about acquisitions. He'll talk about human resources. He'll talk about valuations of companies. Lots of good things on the agenda. And at the towards in the latter half of the show, we're going to welcome Micheline Mayette, HR specialist from FL Fuller Landau. And she will talk about employee brand and experience and challenges for entrepreneurs and setting themselves apart in this tight labor market. So lots of good things on the way. But in the beginning, what we're going to talk about, we have a few articles that I've been reading in the last little while, and I wanted to kind of raise them here tonight. So one of the first things I noticed is Première Moisson. Everybody knows that lovely, delicious bakery. They unionized. They about 180 workers in their bakery in Baie-D'Urfé. They unionized on Friday, and it's not so much that the fact that they unionize. I guess my point there, my takeaway from this article was for entrepreneurs that don't yet have unions and that are afraid of getting unions, you might not always be able to avoid it, but be mindful that it's out there. We are in Quebec. Be mindful that, treat your employees, be a little bit different. We're going to talk about that towards the end of the program. Just don't make it enticing for a union to come in. Again, not that you can always control it, and it's not necessarily for every business. Just keep it in mind. It is out there, and you should really just try. I can't say I've dealt with some businesses that have had unions. Some have had good experiences. Not everybody's had great experiences. So just be mindful out there and keep an eye on how you are treating your employees. What kind of work environment? What kind of pay? Of course, that definitely comes into play. And just be mindful of that because unions aren't always welcome by all entrepreneurs. Here's an interesting article that I was reading in the Financial Post. And yes, it relates more to the tech side of business and entrepreneurs, but it's really referring to an aspect called the kill zone, or inside the kill zone. And that's really when you're a startup company and you're going against, or there's all these big tech giants out there, the Googles, the Apples, the Facebooks, the Amazons, and whether it's just an absolute minefield for startups. Giants, they crush the competition or they buy it, which might actually be good for entrepreneurs looking to sell. But this article really goes on to talk about the good and the bad of being inside that kill zone, being that startup, that tech startup, or any startup for that matter, that really you could get crushed by the big businesses. The reality is, they cite a couple of examples. Sonos, that used to work very closely and collaborate with Google and Amazon, and Google and Amazon gave their assistant and Alexa voice controls to Sonos. Well, then they started making their own. And that certainly didn't work well for Sonos, and they eventually had to bring a lawsuit or right infringement. But there's a perfect example, and lots of people know Sonos and definitely the Alexa and voice assistant brand, and that is something that they just ultimately took over because they were so big and they were getting into that area. Based on, if Wikipedia is correct in this next statement, Facebook, since since it got its domain name in 2005, has made over 80 acquisitions. So this is something that the big guys, the tech giants, are really, really pushing. Now, again, there's so many startups out there. We see it all the time. Is it fair? Is it not? You could argue both sides. Competition Bureau kind of looks at it. Are they looking at it closely enough? Maybe yes, maybe no. But the reality is, if you can build something, you can create a niche. It happens all the time. It goes on, and the article just continues to go on and say, and of course, advise or mention that you don't necessarily build businesses to keep it forever ever either. Although some businesses and entrepreneurs feel like it's their baby and they definitely don't want to let it go. But many entrepreneurs, and I would say this should be actually a target for most entrepreneurs, you should look to eventually sell your business and not necessarily cling to it forever. So in the kill zone, where you have your tech giants that are out there potentially buying everything, might actually be not a bad thing to happen. And again, it's not like you're competing with Google. You're not going to go out and start a new search engine, but Google itself might offer some great services that could really help out the startup entrepreneur. So it was a very interesting article. It was I believe in Friday's Financial Post, and check it out. It was a little bit of an eye opener, a little bit of a reminder, should I say, that tech startups, they're out there, and any startups again, because think back to the days of Ford and Chevy and GM, where would you ever go up against the big car makers? Eventually there were new models that came out, so there's always room and space for somebody. I went on to read, switch gears a little bit, onto an Inc.com article that I read a couple of weeks ago, and it's entitled 50 Questions to Ask a Potential Startup Co-Founder. And I think this applies to whether it's startup, whether it's business, whether you're buying or selling out partially to a potential partner. I think you really need to do your due diligence. Don't take things lightly. Make sure you figure out how they operate. Make sure you establish what roles. Yes, so I'm sure you'll step on each other's toes a little bit, or there'll be some overlap, but make sure what roles you do. It goes on to talk about personal motivations and what impact does that person want to have. Investigate. It's you're getting into bed with somebody. Okay, it might be for less fun than you would normally get into bed with somebody for, but still you're really going to work out with them day in, day out. How do they work with their team? What type of management style do they have? Are they going to be compatible with yours or not? What is the commitment to finances? Is it somebody coming in just as a financial partner or an idea partner, or they have a phenomenal contact network? Really, really just identify all these aspects of an individual. Again, you're dating them to eventually marry them, but when you become shareholders, you're going to be married. So never, ever, ever lose sight of that. We're going to bring on Sébastien in a moment from Interfonction and his great story. But in the meantime, I think the other thing that I wanted to mention briefly is I saw this article in Les Affaires, and it was really, the article is called Marcher 1 kilomètre dans les souliers des employés. So walk a kilometer in the shoes of your employees. And I mean, it goes on to talk about a bunch of different details, but the premise is actually hugely important. It's one thing, you started your business, eventually how it's functioning at the 35,000 foot level. You might have known how it worked when you first got into it, and maybe you're lucky enough and knowledgeable enough to really have been there in that, in every single aspect. But if you haven't really looked at all the different detail aspects of how your company is run, and it's from the shop floor to marketing to customer service to the technology that's out there to how you buy, because the old adage is you don't make your money on your sales, you make your money on your purchasing. All these aspects, spend some time with your people that are doing it day in, day out. Learn from them, and actually they can probably learn from you. So there's no question. It's walk a mile in the shoes of your employees, and I think you'll be better off, and some improvements can come a long way. Well, we're going to come back with Sébastien Fournier of Interfonction in just a moment.
professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to Today's Entrepreneur. Inspiring stories from outstanding business people by FL Montreal. I'm Josh Miller. Dan Delmar is not with us tonight. He's a little under the weather, so we're wishing him well. And tonight we're going to welcome our guest, Sébastien Fournier of Interfonction. Welcome, Sébastien.
Hello, Josh.
And the very first question, the easiest question of the night, I hope it is anyways, what is Interfonction?
Yeah, so Interfonction, we are a custom aluminum frame door manufacturer, interior product. So we specialize into, really making everything custom. So there's no standard. So from cabinet door to larger door, sliding door, pivot door, swinging door, fixed panel, tambour door. So anything that is around aluminum, we specialize really in working the aluminum as well as glass. Oh, I'm sorry.
And do you sell directly to the customer? You sell through? You sell wholesale? How does that work?
All of that. So we do B2B, B2C. We have a showroom here in Montreal at Carré Union on Des Carrés. So any people who wants to come in, see the product, buy the product, they can. Most of our customers, sometimes they have their own designers, their own architects, so they will come with their designer and we will help, advising them on our product and making sure it fits with the rest.
We've had, you mentioned Carré Union, and we've had a few guests on here from Carré Union. Union Lighting, the Namers were on the show. LeParry was on the program not too long ago. It's quite the center. How long have you been in that Carré Union section as a showroom?
Actually, it came through an acquisition we made 2 years and a half ago. We bought Sesame Door. So we had our own brand that was Kadrium, doing large sliding doors and pivot door. Sesame was our only competitor we had in Quebec. And then finally the owners came to us, see if we wanted to acquire them. We didn't have any showroom at all. So for us, it was a strategic acquisition to acquire Sesame. So we moved their production from La Chute to Sherbrooke. Our plant is in Sherbrooke. So it's been, for us, it's been 2 years and a half that we are in that showroom, but I've been there for 7 years at Carignan.
Were you looking to so you're saying strategic, you were looking to find space in Montreal somewhere?
Yes.
Because Sherbrooke is, I guess your clientele is mostly Montreal?
Exactly. So we were there. So that's why when this came to us, we were going through an expansion, a new building in Sherbrooke. So we just doubled the square feet. So our next step after was to look for, the showroom and everything. And then during that same timing, that opportunity came to us. And so we made, within a month, we made moving our factory of Sherbrooke to a new building. And 3 weeks after, the La Chute Sesame production to Sherbrooke. So it's been very challenging, but for us it was good because the other thing that Sesame was doing that we were not doing, they had their own installers. So we provide what we call the white glove service. So people coming to us, they buy the large door, $1,500, $2,000, sometimes even up to $3,000, depending how you want your door. But you want somebody that will come, take the measurement, the delivery, the installation. So they don't want to touch anything. They want us to do everything. So for us, Sesame was already providing all that. So it was a good addition to our team.
We're talking with Sébastien Fournier of Interfonction. Sébastien, yes, Sesame was an acquisition a couple of years ago, but when did you acquire? When did Interfonction start for you? You didn't start this company.
No, that's a good point. So the company is going to be 30 years this year in June. The first 10 years, it was not even in the door business. It's only in 2000 that the previous owner started doing aluminum frame door, cabinet door. He got inspired by Europe, so he was the first in North America to produce aluminum frame door. And then for us, the journey started 5 years and a half ago. It's my wife has been a business consultant for 15 years, and Interfonction was one of her customer. And the previous owner, had nobody to take on the business, and he he was ready to retire. He was a little sick, so this opportunity came to us, and my wife, came to me and says, we have this opportunity. Would like to jump in. I was still working in IT here in Montreal.
So this was really outside of your domain, we say.
Yeah, and so we were not ready to both jump into that opportunity. So my wife says, if we jump into this, I'm gonna bring one of my son into the journey. So my stepson Joanne, my stepson Yann Tardy, and my wife Joanne Tousignan have been with me since the beginning.
And it's radio you can't see, but his wife Joanne is sitting next to him, trying not to kick him as he speaks, and making sure he says all the right things. But so let's talk about that acquisition for a minute. That acquisition of Interfonction, was it a smooth process? I know your wife had already known them for a while, but talk a little bit about the acquisition process.
Actually, it was pretty fast. First discussion was like mid-February, and June 1st we were taking over. An acquisition is never a smooth process, although, and even the Sesame acquisition was even worse.
You've lived through a few. I mean, you had the initial one, you had Sesame. There was another small one. I think
we just did another small one this summer. Is
there a common theme? Like, what have you learned from acquisition to acquisition? You must have gotten better. I know that's smaller versus larger, but there must have been some improvement.
We always learn from each experience.
By the 20th one, you'll be masters.
And after every single one, we say never again. But 6 months, less than a year after, you always pump and want one more. So it's challenging, but I guess the adrenaline experience and everything, so it worked. We had the significant growth over the last 5 years, and it's through a combination of growing the business, but a couple strategic acquisition.
There's no question that as there's so many aspects involved in an acquisition, but price has got to be a major factor.
Absolutely.
Has that been a bit of an obstacle, a bit of a discussion point? What's been your thought or experience without killing anybody on the other side? What's been your experience there?
Well, the challenge in all acquisition is when you want to sell your business, you always think it's worth more than it's worth. And when you acquire, you don't want to pay exactly, what it's worth, because you need to reinvest and you want to make sure at some point to make some money. So it's always where do we find the right middle? So I think it's to be equipped with the right people around us. It's a negotiation, but it's also understanding the reality. So as much as they think the company worth that much, when you put numbers, you bring a fiscalist on the table and you explain that, then numbers talk. It's reality.
Did you ever have to walk away from the table just to be sure you walk back? Did you ever have to make such a strong point?
No, but when it was, we tried to stay firm on our position, not to lose the deal, but I think we also wanted to be that to be fair, but not overpay, because down the road we need to make sure, because like when we acquired Interfonction, the guy, his business he had no debt at all. But for us, it was a big investment, and we knew we had a lot to reinvest, to grow and everything. So we had to take that into consideration. So you don't want to pay too much because you have more and more to.
Thank you. We're talking with Sébastien Fournier of Interfonction, a little bit about acquisitions, and coming up, we'll talk a little about human resource with Micheline Maillet and getting talent, and of course, a little bit of ERP and their experience there coming up.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to today's Entrepreneur Inspiring Stories from Outstanding Business People, presented by FL Montreal. I'm Josh Miller. The voice you're not hearing tonight is Dan Delmar. We're wishing him well. And we're coming back with Sébastien Fournier of Interfonction. And we, before we were talking about acquisitions, and, you left off talking about price, and sometimes there's a negotiation factor. There's no question about that. But also, there's strategy involved when you're looking at acquisitions, and that's important. When you're looking at acquisitions, do you also look at the technology side? Is that part of your strategy as well?
Absolutely, and that's always, any business and in any area, manufacturing, but talk even banking, whatever. When you do acquisition, one of the biggest challenge that everybody is operating different systems, different ERP, CRM, whatever name in IT. I've worked more than 20 years in IT, so I definitely know about that. So for us, one good thing about the Sesame acquisition is that at Interfonction, Kadrium, most of our system was based on, aside the accounting, the rest for quotes, production, everything was based on Excel, which is, when you're a small company, Excel is a good tool, but it's limited. So when you talk about growth, you want to make sure you have the right tool in place to help you with the full process, from quotations to orders to production and everything.
It's deceiving, isn't it? I mean, Excel is such a widely used tool, and I won't say everybody, but everybody knows how to use it. Maybe not pivot tables, but everybody knows how to use it. And they think it's like God's gift to mankind, and they're so afraid of ERPs that can do so much more. But you get trapped in this, it's so easy to use in Excel, and why make a change, because it could cost an arm and a leg and training and all that. So, for you, an ERP, first of all, I mean, do you think there's even the right custom like ERP off the shelf that you can just take and start?
Absolutely not. Again, from your
historical experience.
Yeah, and that's funny, because we've been approached by one specifically an ERP company that they specialize. They've sold to a few companies in cabinet doors and everything. So they thought we were a really good fit for their tool and everything, but there's no turnkey solution on the market. So and not the blame to all the software company. It's the effort that it's required to bring the tool at a certain level, because the input has to come from the customers, which is like us. So that's why I don't want to put all the blame on the software company. But there's no turnkey solution. Absolutely not.
But it's also, it's one thing if you're a company of 1,000 people and you want to get going. How many people are you now?
32.
When you're 32 people and you're trying to institute a monster of a program and software, it takes a lot of effort and energy and training.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we are right. This is our biggest project for this year. So we're done with acquisition for another year. So this year, let's focus on this ERP implementation. We know it's effort, but we're there. Today we have customers calling. Can you tell me where are my doors when I'm going to get the doors out? We have to go walk into the factory and say, look all around. Where is that? So there's nothing automated.
No, and at some point you grow to a point where, like you say, you need to be nimble. Your competition, you need to always be ahead of your competition, or at least on par with them. And customer service, if it helps you customer service, then happy customer is one that you keep for life and can repeat business.
Absolutely.
Now, we were talking about ERP, we're talking about it, implementing it. It takes a team around you to do that. First, let's start with the team that nobody can hear from tonight, but is sitting next to you, your partners, your wife, your stepson. How is it working with family day in, day out? She doesn't have a microphone in front of her, so you can say what you want. She can't say anything.
No,
although you might get it later.
Definitely, it's when we are at work, we are partners, and when we see each other on weekends, I mean, for the stepson, it's family. We try not to mix things, and we have good respect, because the three of us has really different strength, and we try to capitalize. Although we have some similar strength, I think the key is to make sure we use the best strength of each other.
You each have separate roles, like you each kind of do different things within the company.
Yeah.
Do you meet formally to discuss, as opposed to just over a glass of wine? Do you actually have formal meetings?
Yes, absolutely. We try minimum once a week. Plus just the three partners. Then we have some production meetings where we all talk. But even sales, I am in sales. I try to be part of that, because it's what's coming down the pipe for coming orders and all that. So we have those meetings. The other thing we have implemented about than a year, well, about a year ago, we have an external committee.
A board of advisors.
Board of advisors, yes, of 3 other business people in the Sherbrooke area. So for us, the fact we were family and partners, we needed to have external help to come and challenge us and make sure we don't forget anything, and don't put us on
you
the
find
right
it
track.
very valuable, their experience from outside, a different eye on things.
Yep. And the 3 of them have three
different backgrounds.
Different backgrounds. So one for more general management, another one sales, and the other one technical. So exactly as the 3 of us, the 3 partners.
I think it's great. You know what you don't know, and you involve other people.
Absolutely.
Just before we ran out of time, I know we spoke about this off air, and I think it's really interesting. And we're going to get into a little more human resource topic in a moment. But talk about how you've dealt with your salaries and your transparency with the people in your teams.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, my wife was business consultant before we made this acquisition, and Interfonction was one of her customers. And one thing she put together and suggested to implement is a salary grid. But when we made the acquisition, we realized that this was not in place. And when we looked at all the different salaries for same job, similar jobs, there was not fair for anybody. So this is one of the first things she focused on, putting in place that salary grid to start having complaint or people that the one that yells the most was going to get the biggest salary. So for us, after that it's been fair, and they know where they are in the grid, 1 to 10. They know when they're going to get an increase. There's a CPI every year that we give as well. So it's fair, and we've looked in the Sherbrooke area, the average salaries depending on what they do. So we always readjust, and even over the last 2 years we even increased the grid because we want to retain our people and we want them to be happy. And yes, there are better salaries, but we offer Monday to Friday daily.
And it's never just about the salary, and we're going to talk about that as soon as we come back. Thank you, Sébastien Fournier of Interfonction. And coming up next, we're going to talk to Micheline Maillet, also about it's a tough talent acquisition world. So what are the things that entrepreneurs are challenged with, and what can they do? And of course, Sébastien has one piece of advice.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people, presented by FL Montreal. This is Josh Miller, and we were talking before with Sébastien Fournier of Interfonction, and we'll have his one piece of advice for today's Entrepreneur coming up. But we welcome into studio Micheline Maillet, our human resource specialist. Welcome back, Micheline.
Hi, Josh.
And this is a topic we can probably speak about every night and every time, but employee branding, employee experience, there's such a absolutely crazy talent war and tough hiring market. So certainly, the employers or the entrepreneurs really have to try and make themselves a little bit different and to attract their next brand of people. So when we're talking about employee branding and the experience, what comes to mind as challenges for entrepreneurs?
I think in a lot of entrepreneurial business, they often don't take the time to actually identify what they're offering candidates. So I think a lot of times they'll focus on salary and they'll feel like, our salaries are not that competitive. But there's still ways to identify what it is that, what are the advantages of working for you and being able to put that out there. So one thing I say often is companies will have websites. So every company has a website. I think we can pretty much agree that almost everybody has a website at this point.
Not always a good website, but yes.
Yes. But it could be something small, like taking the time to have a career page on the website, which highlights, what the main advantages are of working there. So even if it's not the salary, it could be the work schedule, it could be flexibility, it could be time off, it could be the values of the company. that you want, people who will be a good fit with. But I think that there's still an exercise to do of actually sitting down and identifying it.
So really listing out the benefits that the employee would get if they were there.
Exactly. The tangible ones and the intangible ones. It could be something small like doing testimonials. So sometimes as an employer, it's hard sometimes when you've been in your own business for a long time. But to actually go and interview some of your longstanding employees or new employees, like why do you like working here, and having little testimonials. But I think, when people are looking for a job, the first thing people do is Google the company. They go to the website of the company. So I think right away to see that the company cares about attracting people and what they're offering, I find, is a good entryway.
I'm pretty sure that they also go to their social media pages. If a company has social media pages to get a feel of who they are and what type of environment they go to, then social media also plays, because then what
100%.
social media can put out and what your website puts out is not exactly the same thing.
100%. Yeah. So, I mean, it's basically all of your online, the way that you're portrayed as an employer online. Even you could look, like a lot of people will go to Glassdoor and stuff like that to go see, what are the ratings. So if the company's ratings are not that good, then that can have a negative impact too. So
what about if you have a disgruntled old employee and it's really not worth it? You have a crappy Glassdoor or a Google review, because they just had a bad day or one bad experience, even though it doesn't represent the company. You have to really watch out for that.
I think most people will know that if you go in and there's one or two bad reviews, I think most people know that it tends to be more disgruntled people. If you're a company of 50 employees and you have 20 bad reviews on Glassdoor, maybe it's not a good sign. So maybe you need to, do some re-examining a little bit too. So, yeah.
Sébastien, certainly you've grown. You're now 32 people. There's no question it's probably not always the easiest to find. You started talking about sharing your salary grid. So other than that, what do you do to help keep that family, that friendly environment, the fun to work there?
Well, we're really, really close to the employees. It's for us. It's making sure they are happy, and whoever is not happy, they don't, just go and don't stay with us. But I think most people are happy because even in Sherbrooke there is a challenge with finding resources and everything. But so far, and we'll touch woods, we've been lucky and fortunate because our own people are referring their own friends and everybody.
What do you do? Do you have social events? How do they stay happy?
Yeah,
just because working for you and your wife Joanne and your son-in-law, stepson, I'm sure that's great in and of itself. But what are the other aspects that
we have a social committee? So yeah, we try to organize activities. We have an employee party every summer before the constructions week and before Christmas, and even
flex time. Does flex time work in a factory?
We've tried it, but not. We tried to stick because it was difficult to everybody to agree. So no, we do 7:30 to 4. So hours are good, for those who have kids and all that. So it's important. There is last fall that. We had a really big peak of orders, and we put in place a night shift from 5 to 10, so only 20 hours. And it's been very easy to get people because a lot of people were looking for a part-time job or a second job because they needed more money. Their kids play hockey and all that. So we've been really, we really love this experience. And if we have another growth, this is where we're going to go with the half night shift.
Micheline, have you seen any unique advantages, or maybe have you heard what are some of the things that future employees or existing employees, what some of the things they really like to see? And almost a necessity these days?
I find it really depends on your values. So that's why I find it so important to put forward what it is that you're offering. And I find in entrepreneurial environments, it really is the flexibility. So the owners tend to know all of the employees, they know their lives, they know what matters to them. And that's really the ultimate benefit you can give somebody, is a benefit that means something to them personally. And that's not just a policy that's rolled out necessarily to everyone the same way. So that's what I find is really an advantage of entrepreneurial business.
And how do you feel about transparency of salaries?
Honestly,
I know it's a loaded question.
I think if you have a great salary structure in place and you feel comfortable and you can explain it to everybody, I think that's ultimately, I always say that you should be able to put your salary structure on the wall for everybody to see it and be able to explain it. So I think if you're actually able to do that, I think that's terrific.
Sébastien, she agrees with you.
Absolutely. No,
Thank you so much, Micheline.
Yeah,
I
you're
know
welcome.
it's a hot topic and lots to explore. So thanks very much for
Yeah,
that.
you're welcome.
And as we approach the last moments of our shows, we do each week, we'll turn to Sébastien Fournier of Interfonction and ask you, Sébastien, what would be your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur?
It's never easy being an entrepreneur, and it's especially when it's the same family as well. So, but I think it's to have a good balance, work. But when you get home, it's home. It's not work anymore. Although sometimes it's difficult because we don't see
Because
each
you're
other
working
during
with
the.
family.
But no, it's the adrenaline of being an entrepreneur. Every time, as I said it before, you do an acquisition, right after that, I say never again, never again. But then you get pumped again. So you are an entrepreneur or you're not. So it's not for everybody. But we made the decision to jump into that 5 years ago, after good careers on each side of us. But so extremely happy with the move and no regrets. We would never go back.
Thank you very much, Sébastien. I think for me, one of my takeaways is coming back to the acquisitions is it's sometimes easier to grow and find your right strategy move by acquiring somebody versus doing it organically and doing it yourself. So not always easy to identify, but that's my little takeaway from that. So thank you very much, Sébastien,
Thank you,
for
Josh.
joining us. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Micheline,
Thank you.
for joining us. We are off for the next couple of weeks. We'll be back on Monday, March 9th at 7 p.m. with a 3D software company called Prévu 3D. So thank you very much to everybody, and thank you for listening. Check out our almost 250 shows of inspiring entrepreneur profiles, and over a decade worth of that on today'sentrepreneur.org. Have a great night, everybody.